Good evening, and thank you all so much for being here. It's really exciting to see all those students in the back row. Didn't you know about sitting in the front row, what the advantages are? But it's great to see you here tonight. Thank you to our Environmental Commission. The City of Calabasas has a number of different citizen commissions that help guide the decision-making in the city and policy, and our Environmental Commission is among the most active, looking at ways that we could not only protect our resources that surround us, but be at the cutting edge of new ideas and innovative ways to reduce our footprint. This is an example. We've done a series of these, and I want to thank the Environmental Commission and Julie Shaisobel in particular, who has spearheaded the efforts for these panels. We are so fortunate to have the former Assembly member and Senator Fran Pavley live literally in the town next door. She has been at the forefront of climate policies, and long before she moved up to Sacramento, she found ways to give back to her community. For those of you that may not know, she was a middle school teacher for many years. She was one of the founders and multi-serving mayor for the city of Agora Hills. She then, in a tough election, made it to the Assembly, where she served for years, and then on to the Senate, where she was recently termed out. So we're really lucky to have her. In particular, when you think of climate change policy, you think of Senator Pavley, and I'll just go over a few of her pieces of legislation that made California famous and led America on this issue around the world. Starting back in 2002, Assembly Bill 1493, the first legislation in the world to call for lower greenhouse gas emissions in new passenger cars. Then there was Assembly Bill 32 in 2006, the Global Warming Solutions Act that created the groundbreaking cap and trade system to reduce California's greenhouse gas emissions. I was fortunate to be in the front row when that was happening as part of her staff, and it was remarkable what she accomplished there. And then recently, her vehicle emissions law became the model in a nationwide effort to improve air quality. It demanded increases in fuel efficiency and paved the way for the current hybrid and electric car boom that we're seeing today. These are interesting times. Not more than a few months ago, California and the United States were at the forefront of climate policy and addressing global warming. And today there's a lot of uncertainty, and I'm hoping that we'll get some reassurances from former Senator Pavley that things will be okay and that we can continue to move forward. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce an extraordinary woman and American, Fran Pavley.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And you're right, I live very close to Calabasas. It's my backyard fence line. And in periods of heavy rain, I think part of Calabasas probably is inside Agora Hills and my fence line, but it's all good. And so pleasure for me to be here, and thank you, Mary Sue, for that, where did you go, kind introduction. And she's got a great gig now as the regional director for the Conservation Corps. They do amazing, amazing work. And so here you have the mayor of your city in that position as well, devoting her life to public service. So I was asked to come and speak from a historical perspective, a little bit of background information on California policies. And as a former history teacher, this works out very well because I love talking about history anyway. I went up to Sacramento in the year 2000, elected, and first person elected from one of these small cities out here on the far western ends of LA County. And Sacramento is an amazing place. 40 million people. 1 out of every 10 Americans live here. We have more people in California than all of Canada or all of Australia. If we were a separate state, we would be bigger than, population-wise, 10 of the other states. There's almost 1 million people in each state Senate district. So we represent way more than a member of Congress. And what's fascinating about California, which I didn't appreciate when I went there, is the influence you can have nationally and internationally for a variety of reasons. One is our purchasing power. So let's say we pass a policy to make refrigerators more energy efficient. GE doesn't make one refrigerator for California and a different one for the other 49 states. It became a de facto national policy. So sometimes through legislation, but other times just through market forces, California does lead the way in a variety of sources. And hardly a week goes by in Sacramento where you don't have elected dignitaries from countries somewhere in the world visiting Sacramento to find out more about what we're doing. So it's been fascinating experience for myself, coming from a small town right in Agora Hills and a middle school teacher, to be up in Sacramento during the last 16 years. So I won't go through the whole timeline, but I want to point out a couple of things on some of our policies. And you're hearing now about the Trump administration and the EPA Secretary Pruitt and what may or may not happen with some environmental policies. We're seeing some rollbacks. But California is able to be so engaged on air policies and greenhouse gas emission policies because way back, you'll see in 1965, if you grew up in the San Fernando Valley, you will remember how bad the smog was. Did anyone hear? Dennis is shaking his head. I grew up in Sherman Oaks. Yeah, we went to Grant High, right? Fred, you're years older than I, but right? San Fernando Valley. And the pollution was so bad that the federal government actually put a lot of pressure on California to start cleaning up our air, developing some policies. And where do we get most of our air pollution back then and now? Primarily from automobiles. Today we have about 25 million cars on the road, less back then, but because of our geography and our cars, that's what was leading to air pollution and affecting public health. So in 1970, President Nixon was in office. They passed the first federal Clean Air Act. Because California predated the Federal Clean Air Act, written into the Federal Clean Air Act is an exemption for California. This is relevant to today's politics. This wasn't an executive order, an exemption for California under the Federal Clean Air Act, that California can pass more stringent air pollution standards or tailpipe emission standards than the federal government. It has to be more stringent than the federal government, not weaker. Also under the Federal Clean Air Act, other states have two choices: adopting California's tailpipe emission standards or vehicle emission standards, or staying with the federal government standards. So for them to try to undo California's policies now, that would be a big challenge for them, because you would have to go back and open up the Federal Clean Air Act dating from 1970. California can do this by making sure that our policies are crafted fairly, based on science, and usually based on technologies that are readily available and affordable. So whether it's automobiles or trucks, vehicles, or even stationary sources, California's been involved in our desire to help improve and clean up our air for years. Then you can see other policies that were created. Our Energy Commission was formed in 1975, and in 2002, it was my first 2 years in office. I don't think I knew any better. I thought it would be a good idea. We're hearing about climate change, and there's a direct link between air pollution and climate change. Our number one contributor of greenhouse gas emissions in our state are our vehicles, right? Because they're primarily run on oil, and that's fossil fuels. And so if we were going to do our fair share to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we should be cleaning up our act, literally speaking, as far as tailpipe emissions. So that bill was crafted in 2002. It was the first in the nation to look at greenhouse gas emissions. It finally got a waiver from the federal Supreme Court, and as well as the Environmental Protection Agency skipped down to 2009. California can pass more stringent air emission standards if we get what's called a waiver from the Environmental Protection Agency. It's based on science. Doesn't require someone passing a bill. It doesn't go through Congress. It's just based on whether we have extraordinary and compelling reasons why we need to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. There was a challenge to California on whether we should be able to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. It was called Massachusetts versus the Environmental Protection Agency. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, where they ruled in a 5-4 decision. I remember sitting on the edge of my seat wondering what they were going to do with this. 5-4 decision that greenhouse gas emissions are indeed air pollutants subject to the Federal Clean Air Act. That is why our climate policies are all linked back into statute, back in the Federal Clean Air Act. So the Supreme Court of the United States ruled, somehow some people are still debating this story, ruled that greenhouse gas emissions are a form of air pollution. And most people understand that, but I wanted to show you this historic legal link. So people that are lawyers and a lot smarter than I am, yes, they're watching the federal government, but they know there would be a lot of challenges and obstacles for them to try to undo all this. It was never an executive order. This was done by statute through law and has decades of success. So moving forward then, backing up to 2006, AB 32 passed. The vehicle tailpipe standards are part of AB 32. And then in 2015, there's 50% reduction by 2030. It was called Senate Bill 350 by De Leon. This is relevant to your discussion tonight because our renewable portfolio standards will require all of our utility companies, our investor-owned utility companies, to have 50% of their energy mix by 2030 to come from clean renewable sources. Clean renewable sources. So how does that translate into cars, right? The utility companies now will be in the fuel supply sector, providing outlets or infrastructure is for electric cars, because creating a market for renewable energy is important, and cars are part of that solution. So many different utility companies, Edison, PG&E, San Diego's company, are all now part of the solution when it comes to electric car infrastructure. And then just last year in 2016, signed into law in September, SB 32 continues on from AB 32. I stick with the same numbers because that's easy for me to remember. So 32, it creates targets, extension of targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. We're on our way. We will be exceeding our 20% target for 2020, but cars are part of the solution. This was a picture from 2002. I'm not sure, Mary Sue, if you were there at that. This was in Griffith Park. We had a bill signing ceremony up at the Golden Gate Bridge also, but it goes through that history again, why that's important. Federal Clean Air Act, Supreme Court decision. We had this little problem during the Bush administration. We asked for a waiver from the Federal Clean Air Act. We usually get it. It's procedural. For the first time ever, California's waiver was denied in December of 2008 for political reasons. And one of the first things President Obama did the following year was to ask the EPA to review again California's waiver. We've had nearly 100 waivers before the EPA over our course of history. This was the first one and the only one that's ever been denied. If you're driving today, for example, in a car with a catalytic converter, That was a California waiver that started putting those in cars. Unleaded gas, a California waiver. Ability to get in the HOV lane with your hybrid or electric car, California waiver. So you would know probably dozens of these waivers. You just didn't know we had to go through that kind of process. So fast forward, President Obama announced in January 2009, asked the EPA to revisit California's waiver. I got a call from the White House, it's very exciting, former history teacher, saying, if you can be here tomorrow, we're having a ceremony in the White House Rose Garden announcing that California's policies will become the new national standard. And all those people in the background, or most of them, either were members of the cabinet, but primarily they were the CEOs of all the major foreign and domestic automobile manufacturers who said, give us the time, we can do this. So the Department of Transportation on the federal level, working with California and other states on tailpipe emissions of greenhouse gas emissions, forged equivalent to an MOU, but worked together to develop a thoughtful strategy increasing fuel-efficient standards. States cannot increase fuel efficiency standards, like X number of miles per gallon, right? That's in the purview of the federal government. We can regulate what comes out of the tailpipe. That's the subtle difference. So now this is a national standard because we took the fuel efficiency standards that the federal government can do, married to our California tailpipe emission standards, and you can see the goals. By 2016, each fleet of vehicles will average 35 miles per gallon. What that means is a fleet of vehicles, let's say you own Ford Motor Company, and you have to have your cars in all your fleet average 35 miles per gallon. For every one of those big pickup trucks you sell, you're going to have to manufacture and sell a lot of electric cars or fuel-efficient, smaller passenger cars to balance and get that average, right? Do you understand how that works? And so the automobile manufacturers, and we all want them to be successful. Yes, people still like to have pickup trucks and SUVs, that's fine. But if you notice, in the last 10 or 11 years, they're a lot more fuel efficient. Instead of getting 12 miles a gallon, they're getting 20 miles a gallon. And people will have those larger cars, and I've heard this described on the radio, they're just surprised how much better their cars, how much more fuel efficient their cars are. So we're reducing our use of fossil fuels in that way, but we're really providing that market incentive for all automobile manufacturers to really get into a competitive market when it comes to electric cars and hybrids and fuel-efficient cars. That's why you see a far different range of choices when you go to the automobile dealers these days. It's a lot different than when it was 15 years ago. Or ask your parents growing up, or especially your grandparents. There weren't a lot of choices. Now it's everywhere, and U.S. automobile manufacturers are competitive and in the game with foreign automobile manufacturers like Toyota and Honda and others. Well, here's the big challenge. By 2025, you're supposed to ramp up the fuel efficiency to 54 miles per gallon based on a fleet average. That's going to be a challenge. That's where some argument will be during the next several years of a Trump administration, whether that 54 mile per gallon might be delayed or adjusted to some extent. And there's a couple of factors. The automobile manufacturers see an opportunity to, frankly, you make more money selling bigger cars, do you not? Right? To sell the larger cars, and feel that if the gas prices stay low, there may not be enough incentive for people to want to buy all those electric cars and hybrid cars that they need to sell. So that'll be sort of a subtext of discussion, not rolling back in my opinion anyway, the California policies and ability to pass more stringent tailpipe emission standards or the federal government policies, but built into that 2025 54 mile per gallon discussion was that by 2018 and 19, we would review that requirement to see if we were on the right path to meeting that goal. And it could be based on availability of oil or price of oil or whatever it is, that might be delayed but I don't think it'll be eliminated. And when I talk to people I am friends with in the automobile sector, I think they think about the same way. So the Global Warming Solutions Act was signed in 2006. I want to explain what this is, though. People call it cap and trade. It's really not. It's a cap on emissions. It's a cap on emissions and roll back about 20% to 1990 levels by 2020. That cap on emissions has created the market signal for new investment in new technologies. 60% of all the venture capitalist money in the United States has come to California, and they will tell you because of the market signals. I've had the CEOs of the 10 major solar companies in California say, we wouldn't be here without California's policy in creating a market. And this is in renewable energy. And so what's in AB 32? It covers more than just cars. That's the simple way of put it. It covers the vehicles, the clean car standards you know about, covers fuels. I would say in the next 10 to 15 years, you may not see as many gas stations, but you're going to see a wider variety of fueling stations. You can charge your car. You can have hydrogen in your new Toyota or other cars that are coming out with hydrogen fuel cells. They can operate on a variety of different gases that are less carbon intensive. And we have a lot of businesses in California in alternative fuels that are ready to step up and provide that fuel. I toured a company down in Paramount, California, near Long Beach. It's called Alt Air, for alternative air. It's created a lower carbon biofuel. All they need is someone to buy it. That's the challenge, right? United Airlines has stepped up and is furnishing their flights with lower carbon fuels, alternative fuels produced right here in California for all their flights between LA and San Francisco, and they'll be ramping up. The United States Navy is really engaged in lower carbon fuels. They're doing an amazing job. So you can see what else is in there. If you like energy efficient appliances or building standards, that's part of AB 32, buildings, and also land use planning. So that's what's in AB 32. It's a market-based system which allows for market-based systems like cap and trade. So if a polluter can't reduce his emissions, he has another choice. He can pay some money, and what do we do with that money? We find a way to reduce emissions in some other manner. So we use that money, for example, to provide rebates for electric vehicle purchases, or people to subsidize energy efficiency in their homes, or in a variety of other ways. So that was AB 32. Notice that was Arnold Schwarzenegger. 3 governors have followed these policies the last 16 years, Republicans and Democrats. So this is important if you're reducing greenhouse gas emissions, that you know where they come from in California. See the blue color? That's why electric cars are so important, and that's why I'm thrilled that Calabasas in particular is stepping up, sort of leading the charge, no pun intended, for cities all over California, because we're going to need everyone to get engaged, but we have to have the infrastructure. It's like a chicken and egg. You have to have the infrastructure here in order for people to not have that range anxiety in buying and purchasing an electric car. And then you can see the other sources of greenhouse gas emissions that we'll be zeroing in on. Okay. So last year ended up being a big year on climate change. I think those of us who were fortunate enough to go to Paris for the climate summit about a year and a half ago saw 170 nations stepping up to the plate and working together on these climate policies. Governor Brown has been certainly a champion on all these, first as an attorney general defending our clean car legislation and laws, and then as governor again. And so he's had a policy in place that we codified. That means we put it into statute, SB 32. Governor had executive orders out there. Executive orders make me very nervous, because sometimes things happen where you have a big change and shift of like a governor or a president, and those executive orders can be undone too easily. It doesn't have to go back through legislative review or process. There's not a lot of protections. So SB 32 codified or put into statute law. That means we have enforcement authority on the 2030 targets. And that's important because the businesses tell me they need that market signal that if they're going to keep investing in these new technologies, there will be a market here in California, and our policies aren't going to change month to month or year to year or administration to administration. Part of this discussion this past year, though, AB 197, is a lot of my colleagues, especially those who represent disadvantaged communities, really feel that they, and rightfully so, a disproportionate share of the air pollution impacts fall in their towns and communities. So it puts a greater emphasis on equity, on how we expend monies to reduce pollutions, greenhouse gases, and criteria air pollutants in every zip code, right? And so that's been a really great way to broaden the discussion and support for these policies. Down at the bottom in big letters, all these bills now, yes, they're environmental bills, but this is an important economic signal for our state. Those of you who are students still here, the amount of students going to UCs and CSUs now in California, getting sustainability majors or something in the field relating to sustainability, whether it's an engineering degree or a law degree, they're here because there's jobs here in this sector. So, where have we been and where are we going? You can see the good news is we're reducing emissions, but our economy has improved in California, so we're not trading one for the other, despite some other people's claims in other states or back in Washington, D.C. It's been a success story, but we have to continue to be thoughtful and smart in how we implement them, implement policies over time, make sure that they're cost-effective, technologically feasible, and available. So sometimes I would say some of my environmental friends say we're not going fast enough because climate change, yes, there is a sense of urgency, but you also have to do it in a very smart way, because if we can be successful, and we are so far in California, then other states or other countries will follow our model. For example, in Canada today, they've adopted California's vehicle emission standards. We're working with other countries on alternative fuels. China is exploded now in, not literally, solar energy and wind energy to balance all their investment in coal. Why? Because in cities like Beijing, their air pollution is far worse than it ever was in LA, and they're going to have a really social, almost revolution, so to speak, because of the health impacts from air pollution relating to the energy they use for all their vehicles. If you've been to Beijing the last 5 years, my husband and I went a few years ago, it's worse gridlock than LA. I didn't see anyone on a bicycle. You know, you have these old visions. No, it's a huge country, just exploding in growth and moving rural people into the cities in a very different environment. And so it's very important that we work with other countries to tackle probably the biggest environmental issue of our lifetime, and that will be global climate change. So with that, that's sort of the historical perspective on why your work in promoting the use of electric cars, particularly here in Calabasas, is important. I'm hoping my neighboring town of Agoura Hills will follow your lead. I think it's excellent. Kudos to the Environmental Commission. This is the second one of these I've attended. Well done, and I love the way you include students. I've been to a couple of those classes at Calabasas High School, and it's really important because this is our future, and this is something we can do something about right in our own backyard. So thank you very much.
So what I wanted to do tonight is just to give you a different perspective of, I guess, what we in downtown of Los Angeles are doing. You know, hopefully most of you are working and playing and also visiting over there. You know, we're only 20 miles away, but it took me almost 2.5 hours to get here. And what we're trying to do in our agency is try to shorten that commute, at least within the service area that we have. So what I'm going to do tonight is just to give you an overview of what we're trying to do in terms of climate change impact reduction, in terms of some of the strategies that we have as an organization, and then I'll end with an all-electric vehicle charger vision for the County of Los Angeles. So I just focus on these 5 items: who we are, the agency drivers of what we're, on why we're doing the things that we're doing. We have initiatives and requirements that we're complying with, and then some of those examples. And then I understand from Julie that probably around 7:30 is when the questions will be. So I'll just reserve that. But if there's a burning question, I guess we'll take that on, but very, very quickly. So as Julie mentioned, regional transportation planner and funder. There are 88 cities and 17 special jurisdictions in Los Angeles County. And some of those have their own transit systems. And we are not the ultimate planner for the region, that's the Southern California Association of Governments, but in terms of transportation, we actually support SCAG in that effort. We provide funding. More than half of Metrolink funding we provide. Metrolink passes through here or through this general area. We provide funding for what we call the munis, the smaller transit agencies. We also support the city's expansion of the local roads, for example. We support Caltrans in their work within the area in terms of congestion reduction. So those are some of the things that we do as a transportation and transit planner and funder. We're the system builder, and I'll show you a map of what we're building here in the next 30, 40, 50 years. And thanks to you and thanks to many of the taxpayers of Los Angeles County, we have some funding to actually do all of that. And then lastly, if this can move, we're a regional transit operator. We not only operate the buses, but we operate the trains around the system. We have new rail lines that we not only opened, but we're currently building. So just to give you an idea, this is just a picture of where our current rail systems are. And they're represented by their correct colors. The red is the red line, purple is purple line. Where it's solid, it is essentially built, and we're operating that system. Where it's dashed, that's still either in the planning stages or is currently being built. And as you can see from the statistics down on the bottom of this slide, we have about 96 or 100 stations, 105 miles of rail system, about 400,000 daily boardings. And what we wanted to do with Measure R specifically is double that system, and that was before November. But with the ballot measure, Measure M, we've been given the privilege to actually get up to $120 billion worth of transportation funding for the next 40 years. And what we're going to do with those is essentially not only carry on the projects that are identified under Measure R, but at the same time do additional congestion reduction projects throughout the region. In addition to that, as some of you know, and maybe you know this, I'll just state the obvious. We're in the running for the Olympics, the 2024 Olympics. And if we do get the Olympics here in Los Angeles, guess what? 15 years worth of projects is going to get accelerated and hopefully will be done and should be done by 2024. And that's our goal, to not only create the system, transportation system here in Los Angeles, but to actually create what Senator Pavley has mentioned, these transit-oriented communities. We've gone from transit-oriented development, where we're just essentially building infrastructure, housing in particular, and moving towards this concept of we have an anchor in housing in our stations, but that housing as well as the density that it creates within those rail stations would also hopefully create that economic development, around the community. And we've seen that not only here in Los Angeles, hopefully here in Calabasas, and I apologize for the ignorance. I'm not familiar with the development here in the area, but in many parts of Los Angeles, downtown in particular, we've seen a lot of that phenomenon happen. My group in particular, we're supporting about $14 billion worth of projects, and these are just some examples of the projects that we have been doing. The first row there, about $9 billion worth of projects that are related to transit. We're also working with about $4 billion worth with Caltrans. And then, in terms of other projects that include bus acquisitions, that would include bus division, infrastructure. There's about $1 billion worth of projects that we're supporting, that my group is supporting. And I haven't even introduced myself. Essentially, I'm the executive officer for environment sustainability for the agency, and Chris Lewan again. And we have a staff of about 20 full-time Metro individuals, and on any given month, we actually are supported by a little bit more than 100 different consultants, at least in my group. In the agency by itself, we have about 10,000 people in the agency. Most of those are either rail or train operators. About more than half are rail or train operators. So just carrying forward, why we're doing these things. We have, and as you've seen in Senator Pavley's earlier slides, there is a very strict regulatory climate. Again, no pun intended, here in California. And so in that context, we need to be proactive in all the things that we do as an agency. There's increasing cost of operation, specifically as we expand our rail system, for example, or as we buy more buses in less served areas. There's increasing cost of operation and decreasing resource availability. So we need to be smarter while we're expanding our system. And then the last one here is adapt large infrastructure projects to future climate impacts. The traditional lifespan of an infrastructure is about 50 or so years. But with all the investments that we're doing here in Los Angeles, part of Measure M, for example, is this ability to actually operate and maintain over long periods of time, these infrastructures we're building. So our target really is to make sure that these infrastructures are here, not only for the next 50 years, but for the next 100 or so years. So, and in doing so, we really need to make sure that these infrastructures are adapted to the evolving impacts of climate. As we become hotter, then these infrastructures should be able to withstand those hotter conditions, for example. Just drilling down a little bit, I won't go through each one of these, but these are our challenges as an organization. The third bullet item, there are projects that go through the most vulnerable of areas. We have a lot of transit-dependent population in our system, and as such, we need to be cognizant of the fact that, as we expand the system, we have our transit-dependent populations not only are able to continue going into our buses, for example, but at the same time, are protected from all these impacts of the environment. The other thing that we're also doing is this monetization of environmental benefits. We're actually looking at, when I say monetization, we have benefits, and we're trying to get some revenues out of those benefits and reinvesting those revenues in infrastructure projects. And we can explore that a little bit later when we do our questions and answers. So the rest of these slides are really, maybe this is the last one. So this one in particular, I just wanted to mention here that, we have a lot of reports that we produce, and I will show you a website later on where you can download those reports, especially if you can't sleep at night. We have a 400-page report that you can download, the energy program. These are some covers of those reports, and we can explain or we can explore more about these, especially our climate action and mitigation plan in the agency. So just some pictures, essentially. Biomethane, we're really big in this. We're about to award a biomethane award for our buses. Same methane molecule, but they come from renewable sources. The methane comes instead of from fracking, for example. They come from wastewater treatment plants, from landfills, as well as farms. So those are the kinds. And then The good thing about this is that when we have 100% of biomethane at some point in the future, the first year we only have one division or one bus depot, but in about a year after that, we'll have 100% of biomethane essentially powering our buses. Our agency-wide greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced about 45% and about 75% or more for our bus fleet alone. And we already have the cleanest bus fleet in the whole nation because of CNG. Electric buses, we're going to explore this later. We're in the process of buying 20 electric buses. We've piloted 5 of those. We have some results that we have in the report. At the end of the day, there is a debate between using the investments we currently have in compressed natural gas buses versus electric buses. And as you heard the senator said, although electric buses don't have any emissions, the electricity that's used to power those buses may have some consequences in them as well, or unintended consequences in them. There's some more pictures. I won't go much deeper into this except the fact that we have the largest amount of renewable energy in the whole country in terms of transit and transportation agency. We have about 8 megawatts of power that we're producing for our agency. And in that context, we're very proud, of this. And at the same time, we're looking at community solar, investing in the community in terms of, putting in solar investments where they might not have any, and if not for the metro investment. Some more pictures of buildings that we have been building. And then now for the EV chargers. And, this is just a simple a schematic of our system. And what's peculiar about this, if it's not obvious to you, is that we put in our first EV chargers at the periphery of the system. And what we wanted to do is that for EV owners to actually ride into the EV, into the park and ride locations where those EV chargers are, and for them to ride the system into the heart of downtown Los Angeles. So that's kind of like the idea. It caught on. And so this kind of model is now very popular in the whole nation. We're the first to actually do something like this. Not yet. Yeah, some. Yeah. So, and what we did was that we just expanded from there. From that original Energy Commission grant, we self-funded the Gold Line Foothill extension. We have one Sepulveda station for the Expo Phase 2. And then we got another round of EV charger funding from the California Energy Commission. And those are the 5 locations that we are currently doing, and we're going to finish that by the end of next month. And the last thing is, this whole thing about workplace charging. And then we've been talking to NRG as well as the Volkswagen folks in terms of putting in, EV chargers now throughout the system. And, we can explore that a little bit later. Some other things I just wanted to mention about EV chargers, just really quickly. First generation was an Eaton, we're shifting to GEs. Open charge protocol system, I believe there is a electric vehicle company here tonight who can speak about this. And electricity is paid for by revenue. We don't pay anything for the electric charges that we have been incurring. And the last thing I wanted to mention is this whole thing about EVs is not necessarily the car of the future. Autonomous vehicles is something that we've been exploring and talking about with some of our partners. And, just a statistic there, 16% of Uber trips in LA started or ended near a metro station. This is very big for us because, not only is the metro station becoming the heart of development, but also people are discovering that on-demand transit systems are actually important to have. And then I had the privilege to actually ride an automated bus. That's not me, that's my colleague over there, but this is an automated bus. It was driverless and it was, going around the LA Clean Tech Incubator. I had the privilege to ride that and talk about it with some of our partners.
Thanks for inviting me. Is Lucy here? Hi, Lucy. I was invited by Lucy, one of the students, because I've installed some electric vehicle chargers at Malibu Creek State Park. So she was really interested in my concept and wanted to learn more. This is just, I started Adopt a Charger as a nonprofit. I'm a longtime EV driver. I've been driving electric since 2002. And when the charging infrastructure was first being installed, I thought that I could do it better, to be honest. I really wanted to take it from the idea of how to best serve the end user, how to best accommodate the EV drivers. And I saw a lot of chargers going into commercial areas and densely populated downtown areas, but I wasn't seeing them going in at places like Leo Creo State Beach, where I had to drive 40 miles from my house to get there. And in order to go, zero emissions, I had to charge while I was there. I've worked with a lot of different people. These are just some of the people I'm proud to have worked on projects with. So my first two California state parks are right here in your territory, Leo Creo State Beach and Malibu Creek State Park. I am not a charger salesman, I'm a car salesman. So I want to find, the whole reason I'm doing this is because I know that the best salespeople for the cars are actually the owners. So if I can create an environment where the EV owner can engage in conversation with the EV curious, I'm winning. So if they come up to me when I'm plugged in, actually out in the parking lot, I already gave one test drive tonight. When people ask me, how much does it cost to charge your car? Have you ever run out of battery? Those different kinds of questions. Hearing it from an actual owner really helps to convince people. Sometimes when you go to the dealers to buy a Chevy Volt, for example, they end up trying to talk you into buying a Chevy Cruze. So I really want people to be able to get the information from the people that are actually driving these cars. Another project that I did in the area was installing electric vehicle chargers at the Getty Center and the Getty Villa. So I came to the Getty Center and I said, hey, I will cover all the costs of this project. I will go out and get the grants. All I need you to do is offer these chargers to your employees and the visitors free for the first 3 years. So they said, okay. And since we did this project, we completed we started the project. The installation was in March 2015. At that time, there was only 3 employees between the 2 properties that drove electric vehicles. 1 year later, there was over 50 employees that drove electric vehicles. And in this, I future-proofed this install. I installed the electric vehicle chargers in every other parking space, and I upsized the transformer. So a year later, when we wanted to go back and add an additional 20 chargers between the 2 properties, it was easy because I already had the footprint, I already had the power capacity, and actually there's been about 18 more employees that have purchased electric vehicles since I've did this. So this is really a good incentive that got covered by the KABC News, and they're doing really good with this project. Another project that I'm really happy to have been part of was installing electric vehicle chargers at the LA Zoo. So this is another example of partnering with LADWP and the South Coast Air Quality Management District to get this charging infrastructure installed at a very important convergence of freeways just north of downtown. This has 6 level 2 chargers, which will add 8 to 10 miles range per hour. And they also have a DC fast charger. What Mayor Garcetti there is showing you will add 80% range in 20 minutes. All of these chargers are free. It's probably the most utilized DC fast charger in the whole country. Something else I wanted to show you on the right there is the PlugShare app. We encourage everybody to check in on PlugShare. That's the smartphone app that tells you where all the electric vehicle chargers are. And it also gives the opportunity for people to communicate with other EV drivers. When I plugged in at the charging station in your parking lot, I put in, I checked in and I told people that I would be there for 30 minutes. So anybody looking on that app can kind of gauge, we're using direct observation and driver communication to help share these limited resources. And I have to say, I have on there that it's been really positive. It has. People are giving me a lot of good feedback. I also installed electric vehicle chargers at Will Rogers State Historic Park, and all these chargers are free. When I was talking to the state parks about, do you want to monetize these? And we looked at all the different service providers, compared their plans and that type of thing. And what they said at Will Rogers State Historic Park is we want to give the electricity away free, because our problem is people are poaching parking spots in the neighborhood of Pacific Palisades. We want people to come in, pay the $12 entrance fee, and actually park in our lot. So for them, at Will Rogers, it's helping to solve a problem for them by giving people a reason to come into the lot. Some other ones, Kenneth Hahn State Recreation Area was completed. I'm in the process at Hearst Castle, which Mother Nature's not cooperating right now. So we've had a lot of rain, but we can expect those chargers to go in May 2017. I've also worked at some of the national park properties. These are some of the ones in Northern California that I was able to get some funding from Pacific Gas and Electric and a little bit of funding from the California Energy Commission to install. And this is, everybody that I'm working with, these nonprofits, they all have sustainability goals, but what they all had in common is nobody had the funding. So, when I went to the CSU system and I was trying to pitch them on installing EV chargers, they said, that's fantastic, but we're laying people off, we're reducing class size. There's no way that we can find the resources to put these chargers in. So that's why I was being creative and reaching out to corporate sponsors, looking for opportunities with AQMD. LADWP has a great rebate. So just kind of finding ways to make these projects happen. I've worked with every different kind of equipment. And I just want to point out, because Chris mentioned it in his presentation, the most important thing you can do when you're buying a charger is make sure it's open charge point protocol. It's basically like your smartphone. You want to be able to use your phone with Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T, whoever. But some of the chargers only work as part of a proprietary network. So what happens if you don't want to use that network? You're stuck with a piece of equipment that you can't use with anybody else. So just making sure, if you have that GE charger at One Gateway Plaza and you're not super happy with EV Connect anymore, Chris could switch to Greenlots or Pay with PlugShare or some other different network service provider. And I think that's it. So that was kind of quick. Actually, usually I talk way too long, so.
Well, I want to say thank you, first of all, to our city council members who have continued to support the Environmental Commission's efforts to bring forums like this for all of you. I certainly want to acknowledge all of my fellow environmental commissioners. They work tirelessly. I think you probably know this, but I'll just reiterate it. We're volunteers who serve our community in a way to give back as part of our civic engagement. And so we work on issues, everything from anticoagulant rodenticides to climate policies to water reduction, utilization to environmental chargers. And so that the genesis for this forum really came out of discussions that we had from our city council members. And David Cohen is appointed by Fred Gaines. I'm appointed by David Shapiro. And we just had conversations with them over the summer and said, Calabasas has for years, for our 25-year history, had a leadership position on environmental issues, everything from the secondary smoking ban to the bags policy. What can we do? What do you want us to take a look at in terms of continuing our leadership position? And both David and Fred said to David Cohen and I, what could we be doing around environmental issues for EVs and for electric vehicle charging? We really need an audit about where we stand in the city relative to where we could be and where other communities are. And so this portion of the panel discussion is really an opportunity for you to learn about where the city is relative to some of our neighbors and some of our neighboring communities. And this portion stemmed from a collaborative effort. I stand before you as one of the the environmental commissioners, but I want to just say that this was an incredibly unique opportunity to partner with community members. And so this work came out of community members stepping forward because they wanted to be part of this. There were residents, there were business members. We had 4 different high schools that were represented in this work, and that's so exciting. I think that's terrific. Before I go on, I want to just acknowledge if any of the members who worked on it with us are here, could you please just stand and be recognized? I see Jennifer with us. Who else is here? Oh, great. Nathan, Sydney. So these are student members, and we certainly had more, as you saw, that worked with us over the period of 2.5 to 3 months to come up with all of this data. So tonight's presentation is a scaled down version of what we gave to the Environmental Commission 2 weeks ago, and it's also a preview of what will be going to the City Council in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background information. You know, there are tremendous resources that are available for communities that are looking to enhance their their electric vehicle network. And we don't have to start from scratch. That's the good news. And so we surveyed several pieces of literature. I'm in academia, and so I do literature reviews. And there are resources that were incredibly helpful for us. One of them that really stood out was, as part of this community planning guide, you know, it calls on municipalities to be prepared and to embrace these vehicles of today and tomorrow. And we've heard about some of those things tonight. And so using this as a model, I just want to make sure that most of you, I'm going to assume, have some level of knowledge and or expertise about electric vehicles, hybrids, and alternatives. But in the event that you don't, and let me just say, before I started working on this issue, I did not. I was certainly a novice, although I work in public health. I really didn't know a lot about this issue and how electric vehicles and hybrids are different. And so I wanted to just put this up here for you to take a look at. I particularly like the schematic of the car because I think it helps put a frame of reference for all of us that are very used to putting gasoline in our car and how that fuels the vehicle as opposed to electricity or hybrids or certainly alternative fuels. So you can see what this looks like. I'm not going to describe the vehicle types. I think that you'll have a sense for that reading it. But what I do think is helpful for you, and I think is certainly consistent with what we heard from former Senator Pavley, is that it's not just 1 or 2 vehicles that are being developed in these areas. So if you think about zero emission vehicles and how they're defined as zero tailpipe emissions, and they emit 98% cleaner emissions than current models, their average vehicle. These are the types these are electric only vehicles. These are the vehicles that are currently available for purchase. These aren't, new vehicles that are hypothetical. These are currently available for purchase. Same thing with the transitional zero emission vehicles, and then all the way over on the right side, the partial zero emission vehicles. So if you're starting to sense that you're seeing more hybrids, you're seeing more electric vehicles, it's because you are. And we got a sense from that from Senator Pavley as she described the market signals that are being given to auto manufacturers that these policies are in place and they're going to remain in place. I want to point out that you'll see, for example, over on the right side with the partial zero emission vehicles, 2 that are made by Dodge, 3 that are made by Hyundai, 5 that are made by Land Rover, 10 that are made by Volkswagen. So if you're in the market for these types of vehicles, they are available and more are coming. And so it really behooves us as a municipality to make sure that we're prepared to meet those demands. There are certainly pros and cons of electric vehicles and of hybrids. I think that we can, have some of these discussions during our panel discussion, but for the most part, we heard some of those tonight, including that the initial purchase cost is more expensive for electric vehicles and for hybrids. Oftentimes, similar type models, the electric vehicle or the hybrid has a higher initial purchase cost, as well as there's some concerns around the batteries, and specifically how do we protect the environment given the batteries. And so we're not going to debate that tonight. We're going to focus a little bit more on, again, this was for electric vehicles, this is for hybrids. We're focusing a little bit more on the fact that more of the pros are outweighing the cons, as we are seeing. And it's not just one or two people that are feeling that way. It's in the last 4 years, demand for electric vehicles in California is skyrocketing. And it's really driving the vehicle sales throughout the country. It's no surprise, given the leadership position that California has had, that we continue to see this demand curve. Now, full disclosure, with fuel rates lower than what they have been, that's backing off a little bit. You can see that between 2014 and 2015, the rate at which the demand was growing is starting to decline slightly, but the increase is still there. And so using that data, it begs us to better understand, well, where are these charging stations then? Where are they in the United States, and where are they certainly in Los Angeles? And what we know is that public charging stations, so those that we heard about from all of the members, the panels that had spoken previously, they really dominate workplace charging stations in Los Angeles specifically. You can see where we are on the map relative to some other areas, and that has implications for us as the city of Calabasas. And this is data that was provided as of 2016. So when you think about where we are as the city of Calabasas, we're in the infancy stages of supporting the electric vehicle market. And in 2011 to 2015, the interest in electric vehicles started to increase pretty considerably. But at that time, a limited number of businesses were offering electric vehicle charging stations. And we really had no municipal-based electric vehicle charging stations. That has changed in the last 15 months or so. We now have one here in City Hall. We have another that is going in or is in the process of being finalized at the Park and Ride. And as I mentioned, our subcommittee and members of the community started researching this issue in November of last year, which really led us to the forum. And I want to just call the attention to the arrow there. Where we go from here as a city really depends on our city leaders and on all of you, because it's up to you to voice your interest, voice your area of expertise, and to become part of our planning processes from where we go from here. So it's almost as if the baton is now being handed to all of you sitting in the audience, and to our city council members, and to our other commissions. We have a transportation commission in the city of Calabasas. We have a planning commission. We need the rest of the community to really take the leadership role in this to determine where we go from here. I do want to point out that Calabasas, we looked at PlugShare, as was mentioned previously by Kitty, and this is a schematic that lists the number of public charging stations as well as other charging stations in the area. And I want to just point out that Calabasas, relative to some of our neighboring communities, we have a little bit of growth opportunity in terms of public charging stations. So that really begged the question for all of us then on the subcommittee to say, well, what do we currently have? Let's really drill down and get a better sense for what our charging stations look like. Before I show you that, I want to just make sure that I'm calling into the discussion not just the city of Calabasas and the business community, as well as our school system, LVUSD. There's an opportunity for our school system to really be part of this, and that's absolutely a place where all of our students that are here tonight can help make some meaningful, lasting change as part of this. Common types of the EV charging stations. So again, you've heard Kitty mentioned a level 2. I'm not sure if most of you know the differences between the charging stations, level 1 versus level 2 versus level 3, as well as, you know, not surprisingly, the amount of time that's required to charge your electric vehicle or charge your hybrid depends on the efficiency of the charging station. So most that you are going to find are level 2. Certainly most around the city of Calabasas, as well as some of these other areas that we heard about, with the exception of the zoo. You can be in and out of the zoo and be fully charged, evidently, in like 33 minutes or something like that. Okay? I also just want to point out that you did hear a little bit about the variety of the charging stations and the market for the charging stations. ChargePoint has 70% market share, so it is the industry leader in terms of market share across the country. Now, the caveat is it's very difficult to find market share data that's regional or that's city, you know, certainly at the city level. This is market share data that was available at the national level. But these are all the various types of charging stations that you can find. A little bit about the various options for charging stations and the economics of it, because it's really up to the charging station owner where it resides if they want to make it available free or if they want to have some sort of revenue stream, as we heard about previously, some sort of revenue stream that could potentially go to the location. If there is an interest in some revenue stream components, businesses could offer a flat rate, or the city of Calabasas or whomever has these. They could offer the individuals to charge per kilowatt hour. There's also a step-up model, which is really common for retail areas, where the first hour would be free, and then there would be some sort of incremental payment at the back end of that. Now, the challenge, as I'm sure you could imagine, is the reservation system, because if you are going to be there, then you need some sort of assurances that you're not going to be monopolizing the charging station for its entirety. So there are various reservation systems that are in place. There's also, I think you heard a little bit about this from Kitty, there could be a fleet plan where there's RFID cards that could be given, businesses could give to their employees that would allow employees to be able to charge for free. And the businesses would assume the cost for it, or maybe there could be a very small subsidized fee that could be part of it. But it allows for the businesses to have some level of certainty that the general public would not be using it. So for any of our members that might be here tonight that are thinking, how could I offer this to employees? This is a way to do so. There are also trackers that show the local charging stations, which ones are available, which ones are out of service. And it really becomes as Kitty was mentioning, where you engage as part of it to provide data to keep it real time. Let me tell you a little bit about what's going on in some of our neighboring communities, because I think this is also helpful. So we took a look at 3 different cities, and this was the work of Nathan White, who's here today. He did a fantastic job of surveying several areas, and we're going to call out 3 for you. The city of Thousand Oaks has 1 level 3 charging stations and about a dozen level 2. Now, yes, I realize that Thousand Oaks is larger than our city, but it's not orders of magnitude larger. And it's a comparable frame of reference for us in terms of how they operate. They have one at City Hall, they have them at Park and Rides, they have them at several retail locations, including the Jan's Marketplace and the Oaks Mall. And there is a registration that's part of it, this Blink card, and then as after you've registered, there's a fee that as part of the Blink card for you to be able to charge through the city of Thousand Oaks. In Malibu, which is just over the hill, there are approximately 5. They're located, as you can see, the Civic Center, streets around Malibu. It's a slightly smaller population than Calabasas, but they offer those free. And then lastly, Santa Monica, which is the 800-pound gorilla, not really, but it is in terms of the environmental practices that are very forward-thinking in the city of Santa Monica. They have over 50 locations. Have any of you charged your vehicles in Santa Monica? A handful of you have? Okay, great. So I'm going to show you a photo in just a moment. But as of 2015, Santa Monica, the city council started considering if they would charge for use. Right now, it's still free, but that's not to say that that's going to be into perpetuity. So I want to just let you know, I'm not sure if you can see from this photo, but this is a garage that was taken, a photo of the garage. There's charging station after charging station after charging station in this garage in Santa Monica. So they really are very forward thinking, and there's some opportunities for us to think about where we could go from there. So where are the charging stations in or around Calabasas? We took an audit, we conducted an audit, and this is where the members of the community that were partnering with the Environmental Commission were so helpful, because in every single one of these locations, we actually went to the location, took photographs, documented whether it was working or not, the type of charger, the extent. I'm not going to go through all of that with you. The Environmental Commission had an opportunity to learn about that. It's all contained in our supplemental data. But suffice it to say, in a roll-up, these are where we currently have functioning and non-functioning charging stations. And here's where they are. I think all of us on the subcommittee were incredibly surprised to know that there was one at the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station. Did you know that? Did you know that? Come on, did you know that? Oh, Fred says he knew that. He rolls up to the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station and charges his vehicle there, evidently. It's very safe, that's true. Additionally, as we mentioned, City Hall, Park and Ride, there are units that are at Sagebrush. I know that's not Calabasas, but it's Calabasas adjacent. But unfortunately, the Sagebrush items are non-functioning, and they haven't been functioning for quite some time. I do want to point out additionally that at the El Camino Shopping Center, at Gelson's Viewpoint, and El Camino High School and Viewpoint School are the only schools in the area that have functioning, that have electric vehicle charging stations. And so there's definitely an opportunity for us to consider dialogue with the LVUSD as part of the continuing work of this commission, but more importantly, all of the students here. Because as I mentioned, here's the baton. Now it's your opportunity to make a lasting impact in your community. And as Kitty mentioned, we've got an electric vehicle charging station at the Malibu Creek State Park. So here's some of those photos that I mentioned before. I put these here only for you to be a little bit more aware of what's there, what is currently in our community, what's functioning, what's not functioning. And if you're so inclined, if you're in an area where an item is non-functioning, maybe you could just inquire, what would it take for you to consider either installing one or to fixing one? There are clearly resources available through the city, through other members of the panel discussion tonight that can help expand this network. And then as we're wrapping up, I just want to point out that after we've conducted this audit and we looked at the map of the city council, or the map of Calabasas, we said, there's really an opportunity for growth, for measurable, meaningful growth of electric vehicle charging stations. And here are some that we thought of as part of our subcommittee. They include the following retail locations. Certainly the Commons is a really big, easy one that seems like it's a natural fit given the traffic that we get there, as well as others. I'm not just calling out the commons, I'm saying that there are others as well. Businesses that are located along Parkway Calabasas and Agora Road, the Las Virgenes school district, unfortunately, the bottom portion of that did not transfer on this slide, but there's the district offices, there's 4 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and a high school in the city of Calabasas alone. And so there's a real opportunity there. Other city properties that we may want to consider includes our park system, the Calabasas Tennis and Swim Center, and the clubhouse. And then we've got Calabasas adjacent properties as well. So King Gillette Ranch, and perhaps Kitty, you're working on that, I'm not really sure. Okay. And so I put this bullet point here as an other because it's really up to all of you to help determine where this would go. There are funding sources that are available in both of the city-specific projects. The city did not fund it. We applied for grants, and Dr. Alex Farsadi and Mr. Robert, I just promoted you. And Mr. Robert Yalda, I gave you an honorary degree. And Robert Yalda are unbelievably skilled at securing financing, but there's more opportunities for us to consider additional funding sources. And so this is my last slide. I want to leave you with what you know intuitively and what you've heard, but these are specific reasons from the National Resource Defense Council where that articulate where growth is likely to continue to occur in this market. And I hope that through our panel discussion tonight, as well as through the panelists and through just sparking your interest, that you're ready to take a leadership position to help bring this to fruition. So thank you.
I want to say first and foremost, thank you, Julie, for setting this up. Thanks for the city for making this happen. And we are really excited that we are a vendor of the city. And before I even start with this, I actually, on my way here, since I had some time to kill, I wanted to pull a few stats. As you know, the city installed a ChargePoint charging station at their park and ride. It's only been there for a little over a month. We'll consider it 2 months. But what's great about ChargePoint is this power of the network and really the data that it provides back to you, right? Especially when you have cities that are progressive, not just promoting that progressive sustainable technology to your city council, but coming back to them with a story, right? And so hasn't even been 2 months and we have 1.744 megawatts of electricity delivered out of the ChargePoint station, 732 kilograms of greenhouse gas savings, 236 sessions, 55 unique drivers, and 219 gallons offset by the use of this station. So a lot of success right off the get-go. But who ChargePoint is, I'm here to talk about really who we are, what we do, and most importantly, the request was, what's new? Where's the industry going? We all know what level 2 charging stations are, and of course the exciting thing is all the cars that are coming out today. So who is ChargePoint? ChargePoint is the world leader in EV charging. Our mission has been simple: EV charging everywhere, right? What we've seen, and the reason why I put this slide up is initially you had your work, you had your home, you had your around town charging, but the future of EV charging is actually going to be out of town, or what we're considering town to town charging. The biggest impediment, the biggest fear of the adoption of electric vehicles is really the range anxiety. How realistic is this car going to offer my day-to-day activities, and am I going to be able to go back and forth seamlessly, just like a gas, or I should say an internal combustion engine. So right now, ChargePoint does have about 32,000, it's a little bit more than 32,000 public EV charging stations. The city does have the capabilities to privatize their stations, so this is what's publicly out there. There are a little bit more. We do have the largest market share, but what I actually prefer to say is that we have the largest community of EV drivers. We do offer a lot of great real-time status, mobile applications, web applications. I'll get to that later, but what's great is that EV drivers seem to appreciate what we're doing, and obviously we appreciate them driving electric. So why organizations choose us? Really, the hardware itself is, I consider best in class, but the hardware itself is great. But where we succeed and where we offer true value is through the network, through the software component of it, and how you capture this data, how you manipulate this data so that it's tailored and allows you to make or implement the policies that you need, whether you're a city, whether you're a workplace. I heard earlier talking about RFID, access control, pricing policies, stuff of that nature, right? All that stuff becomes important as you look at implementing EV policies at your building, right? So stuff like a cloud-based solution, allowing you to manage every single one of your deployed charging stations all from one web application. The big thing that's coming up these days is not just usage fees and generating reports, but ROIs. I know we mentioned and we were discussing the Commons, there's a lot of retail locations who now don't just want to provide this as an amenity, but actually are looking at how can I, gain some additional revenue through this. There are a few minor details that we can go into, but that's really kind of the latest and greatest is what is the ROI? Back in the day, the ROI used to be never, and let's move on from that topic. But it's actually starting to change a little bit. And it's mostly due to implementing a policy that maybe incentivizes movement, right? Maybe incentivizes turnover at the station so that we don't have people sitting there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm generating revenue because I want to make a lot of money off of EV charging, but I'm generating revenue because it's going to do what I need it to do, right? What I care to show is really why drivers choose us. So the folks that do drive an electric car, I was an early adopter of an electric car, and back in the day, there was no real-time status. You just had a charging station that was there, and it was word of mouth. Hey, there's a charging station over at the Park and Ride. Have you used it, right? Going back to the whole concept of range anxiety. Imagine you were running low on your power, and you wasted that amount of power driving to a charging station that wasn't even available. Where do I go from there, right? So there are a lot of obstacles in the adoption initially of EV charging, or I should say electric vehicle driving. And so what we did is, once again, we developed this network where you have a mobile application, you have web applications that provide real-time status, transparency to the driver. Now I know everything that's going on. I got the details of where it's located, the physical address. I got the pricing policy to see if it's even it's a free station or it costs to use it, right? You can detail the stations. So imagine you're on the third story of a parking garage. I don't want to just know that it's there and circling around. I want to know exactly where it's at, right? And the list kind of continues on and on. But that's what's really opening up the adoption of electric vehicles, being able to know everything that's going on wherever I'm going, right? To move on a little bit, there you go. This is a little snapshot. We are here to discuss EV charging, so I figured I'd give you guys a little bit of what ChargePoint has done in our existence from a sustainability side. Really proud of this, especially the gas-free miles driven. And really, only reason I'm proud of that is because that's you guys. That's not us, right? All your EV drivers that are out there, they are providing these stats to us. So all we can really say is thank you to all EV drivers that are here tonight and everywhere out there in the United States. So going back to the network, I don't want to get lost on this too much, but once again, this is really what's becoming important to any organization. How do I access control my stations? How do I implement pricing policies? How do I capture analytics and data on usage to return back success stories and or additional growth, scalability, right? Am I ready or am I guessing on that I'm ready? 24/7 remote access. Once again, I don't want to be driving everywhere. It was great that somebody drove out to every single charging station, detailed everything that was going on. You could do that on ChargePoint by simply logging on, right? And real-time status and real-time availability. So this is a cool picture. This is our original headquarters up in the Bay Area, but just a snapshot as to what it looks like. The one thing that I would suggest, and if anybody out here is looking at implementing EV charging for their facilities, a big push is no more EV parking only and no more EV parking. As you look towards the future to promote turnover, you should be stenciling EV charging only. The mindset of an EV driver is if it says EV parking or EV parking only, it doesn't mean I have to plug in. It means I get to park there, right? And there's a big difference. You've now taken away a port that may be the only port that's there, right? So I like to show that really just to call us out at the same time, but discuss why that's important. This is the commercial level 2 product. This is our bread and butter. We're now on our 3.0, I'd say third generation. What you'll see from this is we've had a lot of learning when we initially started. So now we have standardized cable management. We heard that way too much, that I'm tired of people having cables on the ground. It's a liability to me. Nobody ever ravels them back up. So we've just completely stopped that, right? We do have a 6-inch video screen on there. Yeah, 6-inch video screen that's on there, and it displays or it shows an instructional video on how to use the station. Another thing that we heard is, I get to these things and they're alien objects to me. What is the first time experience and how do we make that better? So we're consistently trying to make that first time experience better. And then branding and customization are some fun things that we've also added. That orange section and below that black section is a customized insert. So if at any time you guys decided you want to do a customized branding on there, you could do that, as well as the video screen for retail areas. So people that are looking at displaying some type of advertisement there, they can do that. The one thing I'm also very proud of is that we do support English, Spanish, and French directly on the station. We are working on some Asian languages as well, but today we don't have them. But not just our station, our customer support as well, right? So to kind of talk about the future, this is the wave of the future, right? DC fast charging. So level 2 charging is 208 volts or 240, depending what you are. It takes about 3 hours dead to full on average. These charging stations will fill you up about 80% in about 30 to 40 minutes, right? The latest and greatest, the one to the right, or I should say to the right, yeah. We just debuted that this year at CES. Thankfully, we won the sustainability award there for CES. We will be able to power cars from dead to full in less than 10 minutes. That thing has the capability to do 400 kilowatts in 1 hour. Where right now, the best thing that's out there does 50, right? And so what that does is it transitions what we do today, which is called destination charging, or the top-off model, going from location to location, to actually bringing about, and I should say returning to the concept of a depot model, right? Wait until that little yellow light turns on, then pull over, then start, topping off, and then get back on the road. So, our expectations are this isn't going to be wildly spread out everywhere, but it's now going to open up a lot of corridors, a lot of long drives, where you can take your electric car and not fear ending up on the side of the road calling a tow truck, right? But the other thing, and the reason why I want to discuss that is the kind of the latest and greatest in terms of the conversations of what's happening is not the light duty vehicles, but the medium and heavy duty vehicles. How do we transition buses to electric? How do we transition, delivery vans, parking enforcement? Okay, and so that's what's going to happen, and that's where DC fast charging is really going to change the world. It's going to be able to make these high duty vehicles switch away from a gas vehicle to an electric car.
This is for the person that spoke from Metrolink?
Chris Levon.
Yes. I wanted to know, because Los Angeles is such a sprawling city, we really have not had the kind of mass transit system that other cities like Washington, D.C. and London and big cities have. Is that ever going to be part of the vision? I know we have Metrolink now, and it sounds like we're going to be expanding a lot between now and hopefully the Olympics. But are we ever going to have a subway system? Are we ever going to have a monorail? Are we ever going to have anything that is going to be able to get us from one edge of the city to the other one?
Yeah, if you stay within the city of Los Angeles, we already have a subway system. The red line and the purple line is a subway. We're going to expand the purple line in particular from Wilshire and Western, right by Koreatown, all the way out to the Veterans Hospital. And it's about 10, 15 miles of subway that we're expanding. And the red line, for example, already goes from downtown Los Angeles all the way out to North Hollywood. And from North Hollywood, there's the Orange Line busway that goes from there to Canoga Park. And then that's east-west. And then from Canoga Park all the way out to the 134 freeway. And then that's being contemplated. I actually was in a field trip yesterday on doing some work on the Orange Line busway to prepare it to become a real system in the future. So there's a lot of that work, and when we do get the Olympics at some point in the future, there's always these elements of transit, not only in the western part of the city, but also especially in the eastern part where it's mostly needed, where most of the transit-dependent populations are situated. So, yeah, welcome.
What is the approximate cost to, in electricity to charge a car? So if I pull up, yeah.
Well, at home, I pay 30. You're welcome. At home, I pay $30 a month to charge my car. When I charged at One Gateway Plaza at Metro headquarters, it was $3 for the day. I mentioned Malibu Creek State Park, where it's absolutely free, and thanks to Chevy. And there's a program that nobody's mentioned here, the No Charge to Charge program. So that EV charger that's in the parking lot, if you buy a BMW i3 or the Nissan Leaf, they give you 2 years of free charging on the EV Go network. And just to give you an idea, excuse me, if you're paying to charge, it still equates to like $1 a gallon of gasoline. So it's even if you're paying 29 cents a kilowatt hour, it's still going to be cheaper to own an electric vehicle.
My question was, so I went to high school.
Oh, okay.
So if the school put in a charger,
Well, I could tell you, like at Malibu Creek State Park, for 8,717 kilowatts of energy that they use since I've installed that EV charger, it's cost them in the last 3.5 years $1,307 of electricity.
do you know approximately how many cars that would be?
Each car, the average car charges at about 4 kilowatts and 4 kilowatts per hour. So nobody's actually typically coming totally empty to your place. So I would say it's like, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, 50 cents of electricity. I don't know, do you have something?
Yeah, no, actually, it sounds like, so to answer your question directly, there's a low end and a high end, and it's better to look at it from an hourly perspective. So going back to what she was saying, low-end vehicles charge at about 2.7 kilowatts per hour. High-end vehicles will draw everything you throw at it. If you're 240 volts, it's 7.2. If you're 208, it's 6.24. And all you need to do is take that number and multiply it by whatever your battery size is another way to look at it. So I'm not smart at math, right? So I'm going to use 10 cents. I have a 24 kilowatt battery. So for me to go 100 miles in my Fiat, it's 24 times 10 cents. It's a whopping $2.40. Right? And so that's how you would gauge, what is this going to cost me from an hourly perspective to charge my car, right? So
If the school district put up a charger, I'm hearing that it would use, each charger would use probably about $5 worth of electricity a day?
There's also the initial cost of the charger.
Right.
Right? So there's the initial cost of the charger that's dependent on if it's level 1, level 2, level 3, and then there's the ongoing cost. So the school district could decide, do they want to fully subsidize it, or provide it free? Do they want to offer it to employees at a reduced cost? There could be some revenue component that could be coming in for the school district. I think what we heard is that there are a variety of models that could be considered. Sure. As part of it. The one thing I do want to say, though, is that at El Camino High School, they have 4. And at Viewpoint, are there 2? Where's Jennifer? There's 1 at Viewpoint. So this is working at other schools, clearly. I think it's just a matter of deciding, having a conversation with the school district to be able to determine who's going to bear the initial cost of the charging station and then the various models on an ongoing basis. Yeah.
Yes. Microphone. Yes. I'm impressed with a difficult assignment you have in your job to try to determine the direction of a this enormous system of movement. I think you said there was 370,000 boardings on the existing system, and that there was
1.5 million per day. That's for the bus and train.
How much is it?
1.5 million boardings a day.
Oh, it's 1.5.
Yeah, 370,000 for the
What I'm
rail
curious
itself.
about is, as the environmental officer, and given these not overwhelmingly huge amounts of money, 120 billion, we're also trying to build a rail system to San Francisco that's priced at 50 billion, 60
Yeah, the high-speed
billion.
rail system. Yeah.
And what I'm really curious about is how the rise of automated car technology is going to impact
Yeah.
the investment that's currently contemplated for the existing build-out of rail and these fixed line units, which seem primarily designed to serve poor people. I'm looking, as I listen to you, I have this vision of a city where people of modest means use a public welfare system provided by a centralized operational authority, and then the other wealthy people prefer to have individual pods that carry them to their destinations. And looking at the rise of automated vehicular transportation, which I assume will begin by the middle of the century, I'm wondering, how can we make a 100-year or a 50-year, given the rise of this other system, which seems so much more...
We have other people asking questions.
I think he gets my drift. How do we know whether to build fixed rail or what if we took 120 billion and put it into automated...
Yeah. The short answer to automated systems is that it will encourage a lot more congestion because now, it took me almost 2.5 hours to get here. I can't really do anything except to focus on the road. But with it's up to, there's a lot of models out there about that right now. But right now, as far as the physical automated systems that prior to DMV actually putting some restrictions on it, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 miles per hour. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask a real quick question, then pass it to someone else who has a question.
Sure.
For everybody, at Gelson's, there's a charging station, but it doesn't work on my vehicle. So for whoever can speak to adapters, somebody said a Tesla can adapt to others, and so can somebody just speak to that issue? And also, there's a number of the ones at Albertsons and Sagebrush are broken, and the ones over by Taco Bell, nobody even knows they're there. So my question is, in terms of city planning, do you guys have any thoughts on putting them in locations where they will get more use? And do you have any ideas in terms of the city being able to pay for them? So I'll just throw all those questions at you and pass the microphone.
I was going to say, just talk about the metro system in particular. From day one, we actually had been charging, like what Kitty said, $1 per hour and $3 per day. And I encourage the city, if this is something that you're really serious about, to have some form of a uniform system, if you may. Encourage all the early adopters here in the city, those who are thinking about putting EV chargers, to actually maybe have one vendor through the city, and everybody buys through that vendor, or a series of vendors, so that you have not only uniformity in those plugs, but at the same time in terms of operations and maintenance, and that's really the most critical part. On my end, we don't really worry about operations and maintenance as an LA Metro, because we have EV Connect, which is our vendor, who actually takes care of that as part of our system. And every month, it's a modest $1,000 we get back from them, after everything's said and done, to pay for our electricity. So.